What's cropping up, stockers? Zack? Zack the stock cropper. You can see behind me the hinterlands are white. Winter is back. Looked like we were ready to plant a few days ago. Fields were getting really dry. And then we got a blizzard, 8 to 10 inches of snow with 50-mile-an-hour winds, some higher, power flashes through the night. And well, we're not going to be planting this week, so I'm safe to say. Anyway, going to be a good video today. For those that saw my tweet here on Thursday, well, this video was planned to be about twin row corn and what I've been learning and why I want to use more of it on my farm. But the fun thing is I had a great breakthrough on the treadmill yesterday, just kind of thinking. Treadmill exercise is a great time to think. Had a lot of good ideas. Seems like the blood flow is always equates to better thinking and concepts, and that's where this happened. So anyway, we're going to talk about an alley cropping, intercropping concept, a tweak on a nut I've been trying to crack, along with several others for the last five or 6 years, and I'm excited to share with you. So let's get going. Okay, so the plan for this week's video was to talk about twin row 60-inch corn specifically, and why I wanted to go to it. So I want to, quick backstory on how I got to this point. I've been interested in my journey over the last 15 years of intercropping and gaps and things like that. I tried lots of different things. I bought this planter 2 years ago to actually try twin row corn, because I think twin row corn is the answer for how to put gaps in and not sacrifice overall yield. Because you're not going to get anyone to do anything at scale if you're only getting 90 to 95% yield. If you do 60-inch single corn, that's typically what it is. And so I wanted to test that last year, and so I put in a test plot with the help of Pioneer that basically compared 60-inch corn versus 30-inch corn, and then versus 60-inch twin row corn. And we used 8 different hybrids in comparison to see what happened across the different systems, also to see hybrid flexibility to how hybrids react to this type of a system. Because my friend Junior Fansteel did a great study, I don't know, it was 5, 6, 7 years ago probably now, where he looked at the difference in hybrids. It makes a big difference in how hybrids react to the system. So the results of what we learned last year and why I'm doing more of this stuff this year came out as such. So the 30-inch corn was better than the 60s. So the 60-inch singles averaged on average about 92% of the overall yield of what the 30 inches were. If I can find my data sheet, I'll throw it up, but I think the 30s averaged somewhere around 210 bushels to the acre, and then the 60-inch signals would have been 92% of that on average. That 60-inch yield ranged from, I think, about 70% yield of the same hybrid in 30s, and then all the way up to about 96%, if I remember right. So then I put in 4 hybrids, is all I had left for in my plot, but I put in 4 hybrids of 60-inch twin row corn to see how that would compare. And of those 4 hybrids, the range of increase, so the 60-inch twins beat 30-inch corn from the tune of, the lowest was a 5 bushel an acre increase all the way up to a 32 bushel an acre increase. P0859 AM was 215 in 30s and 247 in 60-inch twins. So that's why I decided that I'm going to, after that trial, that I wanted to do more 60-inch corn or 60-inch twin row corn on my farm, because I thought that we have likely found the scenario where we can keep up or even be better than standard 30-inch corn. And I want to talk next about why that is. So the thing I've been fascinated about with the why you get the advantage, or why should you get an increase by crowding plants and leaving a gap? Well, essentially you're creating an edge row on every row across the field. So What that does, it allows sunlight to penetrate and fuel leaves closer down to the bottom of the canopy on either side here, and then the same thing over here. So you have increased sunlight feeding all of the plants in the canopy. In a normal 30-inch canopy, your leaves, where yield gets built from in a regular 30-inch canopy, is from basically the ear leaf and up. When you get into these wider gap arrangements, when you get light penetration down further, you can do more photosynthesis. So the other thing that happens in these systems as well is you get more airflow. And when you get more airflow and more cycling of air, one of the things I learned at my field day last year when we had Jerry Hatfield come and talk was he said you actually can increase, and they've done studies at this when he was at the Iowa State University, I should say. They did studies where they were able to quantify that you get better CO2 cycling into your canopy if you have these gap windows that are open, and likely why. So it's one thing to have sunlight, but you've got to have the CO2 to be able to take in through the stomates on the plant to convert into sugars to drive yield. And so the combination of light, the gas exchange, the other thing with these alleys is, and some people have argued with me on whether or not this is true, but you are increasing airflow through the canopy. So technically you should decrease the risk of foliar disease by drying dew off earlier in the morning with increased airflow where it's not just a dense canopy. At night, you're more likely to vent the hot air back up into the atmosphere, or I should say allow the heat to escape the canopy rather than a solid seated canopy in itself. So the whole idea of putting fungicides on when it's hot to maintain or to minimize ethylene production in plants so they don't get stressed out and senesce early. There's just a whole bunch of fun changes in this arrangement that I really, really like about the idea of 60-inch twin row corn. The problem that I was trying to solve on the treadmill yesterday is I was thinking, how am I going to get set up to put some sort of cover crop? Because when you leave a gap like this, you have a lot of space where sunlight can hit the ground and trigger weeds. Now you can come out and put herbicides down to control that, but then eventually, once you get past, V8, you really can't do a lot with herbicides in standing corn. So you need some sort of cover in the middle here to protect the soil, feed the biology in this zone. And I didn't have a really good way of trying to solve that riddle. I've got a couple different pieces of equipment that might be able to do it, but it's going to take a lot of retrofitting. In order to plant, or in order to travel through this schematic, you've got to be on a 120-inch stance. So when we plant this, the inner wheels will be taken off the planter. So you can see where the 120-inch stance goes right in between here. These two units, and the same on the other side. So then if I'm going to have a drill come behind, I'm going to have it have a 120-inch tram line. And it's just going to be an expensive, time-consuming thing for the little bit I'm going to do. I was asking myself, is this really worth it? And that is when I had the aha moment that I'm about to talk about next. Okay, so I came home and I just had to marker board this out so it's easier to draw. And I've got basically the system that I'm proposing going to, which is the 60-inch twins with covers. Then I've got comparative of the intercropping we've done, stock cropping, and then the new schematic I'm going to show you underneath here in just a bit. So this is what the 60-inch twins would look like. Again, these are 60-inch on centers. It's an 8-inch twin row, so 8-inch gap between each one of the rows. And then in between here, we would have 52 inches of gap to put in a cover crop of some type to not only keep weeds down like I talked about in the previous clip here, but to fuel biology. And the cool thing about this idea is that next year this is potentially a really nice idea for continuous corn, where you simply just shift your twins over and you plant into the center of where you had this really diverse, nice, biologically rich mix of plants that grew the previous year. So that's essentially the concept with this. So when we put dollars and cents to it, let's say, I said, if you're averaging 225 bushel corn, is kind of a baseline for what I'm used to with regular 30-inch production. and say I just have the increase that I talked about in the clip earlier here. So say we grow 240 bushel corn, and we have the potential for grazing that gets us about $1,080 roughly, $1,100, figuring 450 corn. And then, if you have the option to graze, you have, the potential value of turning livestock out into a system like this. I don't have that. I don't have fences. I don't have cattle. There really isn't that in much of northern Iowa. And the other thing I don't have currently is I don't have a way to seed cover crops in between 60-inch twins. It's a challenging piece, and I'm in a $4.50 and sub $10 bean market with cost reduction this year. I don't need another project to go spend money on to try to invent a rig to do this. I have some things that could potentially come together, but it's going to take a lot of doing to do it. And so that's why I was sitting on the treadmill and I was thinking about, is this really the way? This is kind of a simple monocrop way, but it does have some additional diversity in here. But it's not quite, I don't know, for some reason it just wasn't hitting me right. And so I was thinking on the treadmill about the productivity of, being able to grow 240, 250 bushel corn off of these 60-inch gaps. And for some reason that number kept sticking in my head. I'm doing that with a 60-inch pattern. And essentially it's similar to, a 60-inch twin is essentially like a 4-row 30. It's that space it's taking up represents about that width there. So it's the gap and then another 30 inches on either side of what it's taking advantage of. And so then I started thinking about, well, shoot, if that's possible, then really all I need in an intercrop system is a 60-inch twin row gap. And that's where the power of the twin row planter gave me this aha moment for this new schematic that I've been hinting toward in the video here. And so this new schematic is essentially a replica of 120-inch or 4-row strip intercropping, but it's hacked to give you more space for a small grain or a forage crop, or the ability to have a tram line to make multiple applications or multiple trips throughout the year in between the tall growing corn. What makes it really exciting is it stays on the same tram line on 120-inch trams that you could use in regular twin row, or you could use it in 30-inch corn production. So everything stays on a 30-inch center, if that makes sense. So you really don't have to change a lot of equipment to go to a really unique intercrop setup. So what we do here is, if we knew that in the past we could grow 240 bushel corn with twin 60s, we go over here and we do the twin here, but then in order to not have to put a cover crop in to really juice the corn production in this space, we're going to put a single row 30 in between there. So we'll make a twin row strips, prepared with fertility or perhaps manure underneath this, and then we're going to put a single row 30 right in between. So we're going to have 5 rows within about a 68-inch footprint. Okay. Now, if we did 4-row intercropping, we would have a row here, a row here, a row here, and then this would be the 4th row. And then the same thing over on this side, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so then we would only have a 10-foot gap. The problem with a 10-foot gap is that you have less of a light angle, especially in north-south row arrangements, which are optimal for corn strip intercrop production, to get enough light to get a meaningful crop growing in between. The other issue in 10-foot intercrop is it's really hard to get machinery down a lane like that. There's not a lot of headers that exist that are made to go down a 10-foot lane, say to harvest a small grain, or a swather, or even a grain drill. I've yet to find a grain drill that will fit in a 10-foot alley. There's lots of 10-foot drills that have wheels on the outside that would run over the corn next to it. And so the beauty of the twin row is you force those rows together, and it only takes a 68-inch footprint to have the same output capacity of what you would have with a 120-inch gap like that if you were in a standard a standard 30-inch arrangement there. So it gives us this extra space on the margin to cheat over to the corn. Now, we don't want to farm all the way up next to the corn because obviously this crop is going to be drawing from that too. So we need to have respect and keep a margin. But what this gives us room for is now we have 172 inches or 14.4 feet instead of 10. And say even if we cut 18 inches, give an 18-inch margin on these outside rows to drill up next to, now we have something where you can come in with a 13-foot bean platform or a 13-foot, or use a 13-foot platform head to harvest either your small grain, whether it's wheat or oats or rye, and then or a swather. So say you have a hay crop that you put, an annual hay crop that you come in here, or if you're, if you've got cattle and you want to do some green chop, you've got the ability to come in here with machinery on 120-inch centers. So this is where the tram line would be. And you can, everything on this is all 120-inch center traffic so that you can get through. And it allows just a ton more flexibility for equipment options, as whether it's small equipment, whether it's a 3-row or 4-row corn head to harvest this corn, or a 13-foot platform, or if you went up to larger stuff and say this stuff was cleaned off and you came in on a 120-foot tram line with your combine and a 30-foot head, you could harvest these rows on the outside, and you'd have essentially the 4 rows in the middle that aren't here, and then you'd have it out this. So a 30-foot pass would take this amount of corn going through here. And then likewise, if you had soybeans, you'd have 14, 14, and 5. So a 35-foot platform, if you harvested the corn first, you could come in if you had like a relay crop of oats and then soybeans. So the soybeans would need to be harvested. You could still harvest this with a larger head size to get full field pass capacities. So a lot of things that are synergistic and just make a ton of sense, that allow this really super hyper efficient arc arrangement of corn to produce a tremendous amount of corn. So I think, if we grew 434 bushels at the PTI farm in a 4-row 30-inch arrangement, I think if we had that 60-inch where we have 5 rows put into 68 inches of space, I think realistically without irrigation, we could probably grow 350 bushel corn in this space. And it's essentially equivalent to the footprint. So you can figure the math 50-50 with this enterprise and this enterprise, except you're allowed more space for this enterprise to operate. So say a multiple of like 1.1 or 1.2, depending on how tight you get here. That's the cheat code, and why I think this is a really unique and novel idea of kind of hacking, utilizing twin row corn to give more space for this enterprise to do really well. So what could you grow in here? I've got oats and clover. So I've got a new oat plant going in that I invested in, and I'm going to be growing oats on the farm. And so we could come in here and plant, say, 12-foot swath of oats along with an underseeding of clover. So we could take the oats off and then have the clover come up to be, basically a feeder crop, or whatever you call it. I can't remember the term. The crop that would build, nitrogen for the corn crop next year to be flipped and put over into this. So that would be the idea. You would just switch back and forth with corn production and go where the small grain and the clover went, you would go to corn, and where the clover and the small grain were then, or vice versa. You know what I'm trying to say. You just flip-flop this just like the stock cropper. So that's one idea. The other idea would be to do like relay oats with soybeans, or relay wheat or rye or anything like that, where you would come in and use the same twin 60 arrangement, or maybe it would be tri 60s, where you would have 3 7.5s or something in here to get quick canopy on the beans, and then have oats or some type of small grain outside. So you would harvest a small grain in July, first part of August, and then let the beans take off with a later maturing bean, and then come and harvest them afterwards. And so I just took that example, since that's my most likely option with the markets that I have available. So say I grow 350 bushel corn, that's 1575 gross at 450, 70 bushel oats You know, given the fact that we're going to have some gaps in here, my oat price will be $6.50 at this new mill. That's what's guaranteed. So that's $4.55. And say we can eke out 45 bushel beans. Maybe it is 40, maybe it's 60, depending on the year, how much moisture we get. That's $4.50. There's another $9.05. So when you average, when you sum those together and you average them out, you get an overall average gross revenue in this system of $1,250. So a really nice comparison when you think about what 30-inch corn and soybeans could potentially gross. And then you also think about, in a schematic like this, what is possible, especially for a smaller farmer. You know, maybe you only have a couple hundred acres and you can't justify going out and buying, you know, a $150,000 combine to try to farm. A system like this, you could come out and yes, you would have to be willing to work on some things and fix some things up, but you could farm with very, very, very small machinery. We're talking, you know, a combine head with a 4-row corn head and a 13-foot bean platform. You could go and pick those things up, put some work into them, and have, you know, probably a whole harvesting system for $5,000. You know, or you could find a 13-foot swather that you could come in here to swath oats or to swath a forage crop, something like that. Or you could hire somebody to come in and do custom chopping that could fit down a lane of this width to do some green chop to get revenue off of that strip that way. There's a ton of flexibility for somebody to be a low cost producer with a low cost machinery. But like I said before, it also gives you the ability that you could apply this to larger scale equipment and do this at scale as well if you were set up and so inclined to do so. One of the things that I love the most, though, about this concept is the ability to have the chance to put manure on in the middle of the crop. This is an idea that a guy by the name of, I'm going to forget his name now. He's north of me in Minnesota. John Hassing is his name. He came to one of my field days. He's an organic producer, and he was essentially doing something similar to this. I think he was just doing 120 inch intercropping and then spreading, going down with a clover mix or something like that for the organic corn the following year. And he was spreading his manure, flinging it up so that it would go basically into the corn and then fertilizing the strip there as well. And I love the idea of being able to come out on a 120 inch tram line and in picture coming into something like this and driving these strips with a honey wagon with, you know, jets, manure jets that essentially shoot out both sides of the back of the manure tank into the corn. So you could literally side dress manure or top dress manure into a growing cornfield instead of putting it on in November when there is no living roots and it's subject to environmental loss or volatilization or whatever else. But we're going to put this right in where stuff is growing now and be able to be super, super efficient with manure production. Or if it's not, you know, liquid manure, imagine, you know, doing it like what John was doing with turkey litter or chicken litter, being able to come down these tram lines and fling manure into, into a standing crop. You could have beaters here that would just beat it, and it's not like you're having to get across a 20-foot width like you have up here in a strip intercrop situation. You're only talking about 60 inches here to get through, and that's what I really like this, you know, having a jet or a beater that sends manure in, and the rain can take it into the ground that way, and it just adds a ton of flexibility to farming that we don't have with 60-inch twins or strip intercropping. It's similar to stock cropping when we have the ability for the animals to spread the manure during the growing season into a living root. But, you know, stock cropping isn't going to be a system that can scale today, you know, maybe 10 or 15 years from now if we have processing, but this is a way to get a heck of a lot more species of plants, still be able to integrate animal manure from conventional manure sources, and potentially, you know, gross and provide a lot more net revenue per acre. This is gross. I don't have all of the costs figured in, but just thinking about a lot of this stuff and the synergies, this will be more profitable potentially substantially more profitable than what your standard, 30-inch corn or soybean production would do. And that's why I'm excited about it. So it's a lot of stuff we covered today. It's a long video. I rambled, but to kind of sum it up, I'm excited about all these things, and I hope other people are too. I don't know if this is the thing or if there's another iteration of things, but I'm excited to share it with folks. And the one thing I want to say is when I come up with ideas, I always want to cite the people that have been influential in my path in trying to figure this stuff out. There's a ton of really talented people across the country that are trying to do stuff like this. Maybe they're not putting it on the internet, but they're people that have impacted me. So I want to make sure and recognize, because I've been doing this for 15 years, trying to look for these hacks and the codes to crack, so to speak. So folks like, the OG, Sheldon Stevenmer. Sheldon and I have been doing this for 15 years as friends, started with strip till and then intercropping, and then basically everything you see here, Sheldon's had a part of. Lance Peterson, another OG, one of the co-creators of Stockcropper, had the first idea. Jason Mock. Jason is the Indiana Oracle when it comes to relay cropping. It's been super supportive of Stockcropper. Bob Recker. Bob was one of the originals when it came to gap corn that I've got to collaborate with. Joe Bassett, the guy that's helped me try to get Stockcropper to the next level. Really curious in these type of spaces as well. There's just, Junior Fansteel out in Nebraska. Junior has been awesome. Joe Stroman up in Minnesota. God, I'm trying to think of some of the other names, but there's a lot of people, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that are doing wild stuff that has led to this. This is not my genius. I'm not that smart of a guy, but I've been lucky enough over the last 15 years to have a lot of really, really creative people in and around me in this space. And I'm grateful for that. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you have ideas or you have criticisms or alternative concepts, please put them in the comments, whether this is on YouTube or on the Twitters or on the Facebooks. Leave comments, and don't keep it to yourself. I share this stuff for free. I haven't made a dime off of any of this stuff, but I'm passionate about the future, and I want to give people that are looking for unique opportunities, I want to try to give them some of the hints that I've figured out over the last 15 years. So do the same. If you have a good idea, put it out in the world so that other people can draw from it, and then maybe they'll make something better. Hopefully somebody looks at this and says, hey, this is great, but you know what? What if you did this? And I haven't thought about it. I hope somebody would share it back with me. So be good about that stuff. So anyway, that's it for now. I've garbled too much. If you want to talk to me, send me an email and we can connect, or message me on the social medias. I'd be happy to talk more, but I'm really excited. I feel I'm going to try to get this put onto my farm to try to have a small plot. Talked to Jason Mock today. I think he's going to try to do it for his field day as well, so he has something similar that people can look at when we go to that on June 21st out in Indiana. And anyone else, it would be really fun to get a couple replications of this concept out there. Obviously, you're going to need some equipment, but if you've got an old combine and a swather or something like that, and you want to play around on a small scale, it'd be really fun to have a couple different examples of what a system like this could do and how well it could produce out there. So I think that's it for now. It's 5 o'clock here right now, so you know what comes next. Get busy living.